The last time Mira ate a real meal was 2 days ago. It was half a sandwich her mother had saved from a shelter downtown. They split it between them, sitting in the back seat of their old Honda Civic, watching rain slide down the windows. Her mother smiled and said it was like a picnic. Mira smiled back, but inside, her stomach was already growling again. That was 48 hours ago. Now, Mira stood on the sidewalk in front of one of the fanciest hotels in Chicago. The building stretched up toward the sky like something from a dream. Glass doors, gold handles, men in suits walking in and out like they owned the world. Mira was 12 years old. Her shoes had holes near the toes. Her jacket was too small and barely kept out the cold November wind. She had not showered in 3 days because the shelter was too full last night, and the night before that, and the night before that too. She did not belong here, she knew that. But hunger does something to a person. It makes you brave in ways you never thought you could be. It makes you walk through doors you would normally never touch. Mira had learned something in the past few months of living on the streets. Fancy hotels often had restaurants inside, and restaurants meant food. Sometimes, if you were quick and quiet, you could grab a bread roll from an empty table, or find something left behind on a room service tray in the hallway. She was not proud of it. But pride does not fill an empty stomach. She pushed through the revolving glass door and stepped inside. The warmth hit her first. It wrapped around her like a blanket, and for a second, she just stood there, letting it sink into her bones. Then she looked around, and her breath caught in her throat. The lobby was the most beautiful place she had ever seen. A huge chandelier hung from the ceiling, made of 1,000 tiny pieces of crystal that caught the light and threw rainbows across the walls. The floor was white marble, so polished she could almost see her reflection in it. There were velvet couches arranged in little groups, and everywhere she looked, there were people who seemed to belong in a movie. Women in expensive dresses, men with watches that probably cost more than her mother made in a whole year back when she still had a job. And then there were the flowers. Huge arrangements of roses and lilies sat on tables throughout the room, filling the air with a sweet, heavy smell that made Mira feel dizzy. Or maybe that was just the hunger. She tried to make herself small. She tucked her chin down and walked toward the back of the lobby, where she could see a hallway that might lead to the restaurant. If she could just get close enough, maybe find an empty plate, maybe. "Can I help you?" The voice came from her left. Mira turned and saw a man in a dark uniform walking toward her. He was big, with broad shoulders and a serious face. A security guard. His eyes moved over her wrinkled clothes, her messy hair, her too small jacket with the broken zipper. Mira's heart started pounding. She knew that look. She had seen it 100 times in the past 3 months. It was the look that said you do not belong here. It was the look that came right before someone put a hand on your shoulder and guided you back out the door. Politely. Always politely. But firmly too. "I was just..." Mira's voice trailed off. She did not know what to say. There was no good excuse, no story that would make sense. The guard took another step closer. "This hotel is for guests only. I am going to have to ask you to leave." Mira felt her face get hot. Not from anger, but from shame. She hated this feeling more than anything. More than the hunger. More than the cold nights in the car. She hated being looked at like she was nothing, like she was invisible and unwanted at the same time. She turned to go. Her eyes stung, and she blinked hard because she refused to cry. Not here. Not in front of all these rich people who would probably just look away anyway. But then she saw it. In the far corner of the lobby, tucked near a wall of windows that looked out over the city, sat a piano. A grand piano. Black and shiny, with its lid propped open like a bird about to take flight. A small golden sign stood next to it that read, "Please enjoy." Mira stopped walking. Something happened inside her chest. A feeling she had not felt in a very long time. It was like a hand reaching up from somewhere deep and grabbing her heart. Her father used to play piano. He had been a musician. Not famous, not rich, but talented in a way that made people stop and listen. He played jazz mostly, in small clubs around the city, and sometimes at weddings and parties. But Mira's favorite memories were of him playing at home, on their old upright piano that sat against the wall in their tiny apartment. He would sit her on his lap when she was little, and guide her fingers over the keys. He taught her songs by ear, one note at a time. He said she had a gift. He said music was magic, and once it got inside you, nobody could ever take it away. Then he got sick, and 6 months later, he was gone. That was 4 years ago. Mira was 8 years old. After the funeral, her mother had to sell the piano to pay for the bills. Mira remembered watching 2 men carry it out of their apartment. She had stood in the doorway and did not say a word. She just watched the only piece of her father she had left disappear down the hallway. She had not touched a piano since, but now, standing in this fancy hotel lobby with a security guard waiting to throw her out, Mira could not look away from that beautiful instrument. It was like seeing an old friend after years apart. Her fingers tingled at her sides. The security guard cleared his throat. "Miss, I need you to leave now." Mira heard him, but her feet would not move. At least, not toward the door. Instead, she found herself walking toward the piano. She did not make a decision to do it. It was like her body had a mind of its own. Like the music that had been sleeping inside her for 4 years had suddenly woken up and was pulling her forward. "Hey!" the guard called out. "Hey! Stop!" But Mira did not stop. She walked past the velvet couches and the crystal chandelier and the people in their expensive clothes. She walked until she was standing right in front of the piano bench. Her hand trembled as she reached out and touched the keys. They were cool and smooth under her fingers. She pressed one gently, and a single note rang out through the lobby. The sound cut through her like light through darkness. She sat down on the bench. Her heart was beating so hard she could hear it in her ears. The security guard was coming up behind her now. She could hear his footsteps on the marble floor. She had maybe 10 seconds before he reached her. Maybe less. Mira closed her eyes. And she began to play. The first notes came out soft and slow. Mira's fingers moved across the keys like they were remembering something her mind had forgotten. It had been 4 years since she touched a piano. 4 long years. But somehow, her hands still knew what to do. She started with something simple. A melody her father used to play on Sunday mornings while her mother made breakfast. It was gentle and warm, like sunlight coming through a window. Mira did not even know the name of the song. She just knew the feeling of it, the way it made her feel safe. Behind her, the security guard had stopped walking. His hand was raised, ready to tap her shoulder, ready to tell her she needed to leave right now. But something made him pause. Maybe it was the music. Maybe it was the way this skinny girl in her worn-out clothes seemed to disappear into the piano like she belonged there. He lowered his hand. Mira did not notice. Her eyes were still closed, and she was somewhere else now. Somewhere far away from this hotel lobby with its crystal chandeliers and marble floors. She was back in her old apartment, sitting on her father's lap, watching his long fingers dance across the keys. She remembered everything. She remembered the way he hummed along when he played. The way he would stop sometimes and look down at her with that big smile of his. The way he said music was a language that everyone in the world could understand, even if they spoke different words. Her father was not a teacher in the official way. He never went to music school. He never had fancy lessons. He learned piano from his grandmother, who learned it from her mother, who learned it from someone else a long time ago. It was passed down like a family recipe, something precious that moved from one generation to the next, and he passed it down to Mira. They would sit together at that old upright piano for hours. He would play a few notes, and she would copy them. He would play a phrase, and she would repeat it back. Little by little, song by song, he filled her up with music until it became a part of who she was. His favorite piece was something by a composer named Chopin. A long, complicated piece called Ballade No. 1. It was the kind of music that told a story without any words. It started soft and sad, then built and built until it exploded with emotion, then came back down again to something quiet and beautiful. Her father spent months teaching it to her. They worked on it piece by piece, measure by measure. Some nights, Mira would get frustrated and want to quit. The notes were too hard, her fingers were too small, but her father would just smile and say the same thing every time. The hard things are the ones worth doing. Little bird. He called her Little Bird because she used to hum all the time when she was small. Humming in the car. Humming while she played. Humming herself to sleep at night. He said she was like a bird that could not help but sing. Mira had not hummed in 4 years. Not since he died. But now, sitting at this grand piano in a hotel lobby full of strangers, something broke open inside her. The memories came flooding back. Not painful this time. Just there. Present. Like her father was sitting right beside her on that bench. Her fingers found the opening notes of the Chopin piece. The ballade. His favorite. She had not played it since before he got sick. She was not even sure she still remembered it. But her hands moved on their own. Finding the keys, like old friends, the melody rose up from the piano, soft and searching, like a question waiting for an answer. A woman walking through the lobby stopped in her tracks. She had been heading toward the elevator, her phone pressed to her ear, talking about some meeting she had later that day. But when she heard the music, she went quiet. She lowered the phone and just stood there, listening. A man sitting on one of the velvet couches looked up from his laptop. He had been typing something important. Something about numbers and deadlines. But the music made him forget all of it. He closed the laptop and leaned back, watching the small girl at the piano with something like wonder on his face. One by one, people stopped what they were doing. The hotel staff paused in their work. A bellhop stood frozen with his cart of luggage. 2 women at the front desk stopped mid-conversation. Even the people outside on the sidewalk slowed down as the music drifted through the glass doors. But Mira did not see any of them. She was lost in the music now. Completely gone. The ballade built slowly, like a wave gathering strength far out at sea. The notes climbed higher and higher, growing louder and more urgent. Mira's small fingers stretched across the keys, reaching for notes that should have been too far apart for a 12-year-old's hands. But she found them anyway, every single one. The security guard had backed away now. He stood near a pillar, his arms crossed, his stern face softened into something else. He had a daughter about this girl's age. He could not imagine her sitting in a place like this. Hungry and alone. Wearing clothes that did not fit. The thought made his chest tight. Mira played on. The music grew fierce and fast, then pulled back again, tender and aching. It was like watching someone's heart break and heal at the same time. It was like listening to every sad and beautiful thing that had ever happened, all wrapped up in a single piece of music. Mira thought about her father. She thought about the way he looked in those last months. Thin and tired, but still smiling. She thought about sitting next to his hospital bed, holding his hand while machines beeped in the background. She thought about the last thing he ever said to her. "Keep playing, little bird. Promise me." She had promised. She had looked into his eyes and nodded, and said yes. She would keep playing. She would never stop. But then he was gone. And the piano was gone. And everything fell apart so fast that she forgot how to breathe, let alone play music. Her mother tried to hold things together. She worked 2 jobs, then 3. But it was never enough. The rent went up. The bills piled higher. Then her mother lost her main job. And they lost the apartment. And suddenly they were living in their car, trying to figure out how to survive one day at a time. Mira had not thought about music in a long time. She had been too busy thinking about food, about warmth, about finding a safe place to sleep. Music felt like something from another life, a life that belonged to a different girl, a girl who still had a father and a home and a piano. But now, with her fingers on these keys and the melody pouring out of her, Mira realized something. The music had never left her. It was still there, buried deep inside, waiting for her to find it again. Her father had put it there. Note by note, song by song. And no amount of hunger, or cold or sadness could take it away. He was right. He was right all along. The ballade reached its peak. The notes crashed and swirled like a storm. Then, slowly, the music began to calm. The melody came back, softer now, like a whisper, like a goodbye, like a promise. Mira played the final notes. Her hands trembled. Her eyes were still closed, and she could feel tears running down her cheeks, but she did not wipe them away. She just let them fall. The last note hung in the air for a long moment. It echoed off the marble floors and the high ceilings and the crystal chandelier. It seemed to fill every corner of that grand lobby, and then there was silence. Mira opened her eyes. For a moment, nobody moved. The lobby was completely still, like the whole world had stopped spinning just to listen. Mira sat at the piano bench with her hands still resting on the keys, afraid to look up, afraid to see the security guard marching toward her, afraid to be thrown back out into the cold. Then someone started clapping. It was slow at first. Just one person, somewhere near the back of the lobby. Then another person joined in. Then another. And suddenly, the whole room exploded with applause. Mira finally lifted her head. What she saw made her forget how to breathe. People were standing. Everywhere she looked, people were on their feet, clapping like their lives depended on it. The businessman who had been working on his laptop was applauding so hard his face had turned red. The woman with the phone was wiping tears from her eyes. The bellhop had abandoned his luggage cart and was whistling through his fingers. Even the staff behind the front desk were clapping, their professional smiles replaced with something real and surprised. Someone shouted bravo, then someone else did too. The sound bounced off the walls and filled the air until Mira could feel it in her chest, mixing with her heartbeat. She did not understand. She had just been playing, just remembering her father. She had not meant to do anything special. She had not meant to make anyone feel anything, but looking around at all these faces, all these strangers who had stopped their busy lives just to listen to her, Mira realized something strange. Music really was a language that everyone could understand. Her father was right about that too. The security guard was still standing by the pillar. But he was not coming to throw her out anymore. He was clapping along with everyone else. And when Mira caught his eye, he gave her a small nod, like he was saying sorry without words, like he was saying he understood. Mira did not know what to do. She had never been the center of attention like this. For the past 3 months, she had spent every day trying to be invisible, trying to blend into the background, so no one would notice her, so no one would ask questions she did not want to answer. But now, every single person in this room was looking at her. And they were not looking at her like she was a problem to be removed. They were looking at her like she was something wonderful. It was almost too much. Mira felt her eyes sting again, and she quickly looked down at the piano keys, trying to hold herself together. The applause slowly died down, but people did not go back to what they were doing. They lingered. They whispered to each other. A few of them pulled out their phones, and Mira realized with a jolt that some of them had been recording her playing, recording this moment that she had not even planned. She did not know how she felt about that. Part of her wanted to run away before anyone could ask her any questions. Part of her wanted to stay at this piano forever, wrapped in the warmth of this room and the echo of her father's music. Then a woman stepped forward from the crowd. She looked like she was in her 50s, with short gray hair and kind eyes behind a pair of wire-rimmed glasses. She wore a simple blue coat and carried a leather bag over her shoulder. Nothing about her screamed rich or important, but there was something about the way she carried herself, something calm and steady and sure. The woman walked right up to the piano and stopped. She looked at Mira for a long moment, studying her face like she was reading a book. Then she smiled, and it was the warmest smile Mira had seen in a very long time. "That was Chopin," the woman said. Her voice was soft but clear. "Ballade number 1 in G minor. Do you know how difficult that piece is?" Mira shook her head. She did not know. She had never thought about it that way. It was just a piece her father loved, a piece he had taught her note by note, until it became part of her. The woman's smile grew wider. "Most professional pianists spend years perfecting that piece. Some never get it right, and you just played it from memory. sitting in a hotel lobby, like it was nothing. Mira did not know what to say. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. The woman tilted her head. "What is your name, sweetheart?" "Mira," she whispered. "Mira," the woman repeated, like she was tasting the word. "That is a beautiful name. It means wonderful. Did you know that?" Mira shook her head again. She had never known that. The woman pulled the piano bench a little wider and sat down next to Mira. She did not ask permission. She just sat, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "My name is Helen," she said. "I run a music school here in Chicago. We train young musicians, help them develop their talents, prepare them for careers in music. I have been doing this for almost 30 years. She paused and looked at Mira with those kind, steady eyes. "In all those years, I have heard thousands of young people play. Some of them were very good. Some of them were excellent. But what I just heard from you—" She shook her head slowly, like she still could not believe it. "That was something else entirely. That was a gift." Mira felt her heart skip. A gift. Her father used to say the same thing. She had not heard those words in so long. Helen looked down at Mira's hands, still resting on the keys. Then she looked at her clothes, at her worn-out shoes, at her jacket with the broken zipper. Understanding passed across her face, quiet and without judgment. "Mira," she said gently, "when was the last time you ate?" The question hit Mira like a punch to the stomach. She had been so lost in the music that she had almost forgotten the hunger. But now, it came rushing back. The emptiness, the ache, the way her head felt light and fuzzy around the edges. She tried to answer, but her throat closed up. She could not speak. She could not lie. And she could not tell the truth either. The truth was too embarrassing, too shameful. But Helen seemed to understand anyway. She reached out and put a hand on Mira's shoulder. Her touch was light and warm. "It is okay," she said. "You do not have to explain. But I want you to know something." She waited until Mira looked up and met her eyes. "Whatever is happening in your life right now, whatever you are going through, it does not change what I just heard. That music came from somewhere deep inside you. It came from your heart, from your soul, from something real and true. And that is rare. That is precious. That is worth protecting." Mira felt the tears start again. She tried to blink them away, but there were too many. They spilled down her cheeks and dripped onto the piano keys. Helen did not look away. She did not seem embarrassed or uncomfortable. She just sat there, steady and calm, like she had all the time in the world. "I want to help you," Helen said. "I do not know your whole story, and you do not have to tell me until you are ready. But I can see that you need help, and I can see that you have a gift that deserves to be nurtured." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small card. She pressed it into Mira's hand. "This is my number. I want you to call me. Today, tomorrow, whenever you are ready. We will figure this out together. Okay?" Mira looked down at the card in her hand. It was simple and white, with black letters spelling out Helen's name and the name of her music school. Such a small thing. Just a piece of paper. But in that moment, it felt like the most important thing in the world. Mira looked back up at Helen. She opened her mouth to say thank you. But before she could speak, her stomach let out a loud, embarrassing growl that seemed to echo through the whole lobby. Helen did not laugh. She did not even smile. She just stood up and held out her hand. "Come on," she said. "Let us get you something to eat first. Everything else can wait." Mira took Helen's hand and stood up from the piano bench. Her legs felt shaky, like they might give out at any moment. She was not sure if it was from the hunger, or the emotion, or both. Probably both. Helen guided her through the lobby, past all the people who were still watching, still whispering to each other about what they had just witnessed. A few of them smiled at Mira as she walked by. One woman reached out and touched her arm gently, like she wanted to say something but could not find the words. The security guard stepped aside to let them pass. He looked different now. Softer. When Mira walked by him, He leaned down and said quietly, "That was beautiful, kid. Really beautiful." Mira did not know what to say, so she just nodded. Her throat still felt too tight for words. Helen led her to the hotel restaurant. It was the same place Mira had been trying to sneak into just 20 minutes ago, hoping to find leftover bread or forgotten scraps. Now she was walking through the front entrance like a real guest, with a woman she had just met holding her hand like it was the most normal thing in the world. The restaurant was fancy. White tablecloths, cloth napkins folded into little shapes, waiters in black vests moving quietly between tables. Mira had never been anywhere like this. She felt out of place in her dirty clothes and messy hair. She felt like everyone must be staring at her, judging her, wondering why she was there. But Helen did not seem to notice or care. She walked right up to the host's stand and asked for a quiet table in the corner. The host looked at Mira for just a second, and something flickered across his face. But then Helen gave him a look, and he quickly grabbed 2 menus and led them to a booth near the back. They sat down across from each other. The seat was soft. Softer than anything Mira had sat on in months. She sank into it and felt her whole body relax just a little. Helen handed her a menu. "Order whatever you want. Anything at all." Mira looked down at the menu, but the words blurred together. There were so many choices, so many things she had not eaten in so long. Pancakes, eggs, bacon, toast, fresh fruit. Her stomach growled again. Louder this time. "I do not know what to pick," she admitted quietly. Helen smiled. "Then let me order for both of us. How does that sound?" Mira nodded, grateful. She did not have to make a decision. She did not have to pretend she knew what she was doing in a place like this. When the waiter came, Helen ordered enough food for 4 people. Pancakes, and scrambled eggs, and bacon, and toast and orange juice, and a big bowl of fresh fruit. The waiter raised an eyebrow but did not say anything. He just wrote it all down and walked away. While they waited for the food, Helen leaned back in her seat and looked at Mira with that same calm, patient expression. "You do not have to tell me anything you do not want to," she said. "But I would like to know more about you, if you are willing to share." Mira stared at her hands on the table. Her fingernails were dirty. Her knuckles were dry and cracked from the cold. She felt ashamed, but Helen did not seem to notice any of it. "My dad taught me piano," Mira said finally. Her voice came out small and rough. "He was a musician. Jazz, mostly. He played in clubs and at parties and stuff. But he always said playing at home for me and my mom was his favorite." Helen nodded, listening. "He got sick when I was 8. It happened really fast. One day he was fine, and then..." Mira's voice trailed off. She did not want to talk about the hospital, about the machines, about holding his hand at the end. "I am sorry," Helen said softly. "Losing a parent is one of the hardest things a person can go through, especially when you are so young." Mira swallowed hard. "After he died, we had to sell the piano. My mom needed the money for bills and stuff. I have not played since then. Not until today." Helen's eyes widened slightly. "You have not played in 4 years? And you just sat down and played Chopin's Ballade from memory?" Mira shrugged. "I guess it was still in there somewhere. My dad used to say that music gets inside you and never leaves." "Your father was a wise man," Helen said. The food arrived then, plate after plate covering the table until there was barely any room left. Mira stared at it all, overwhelmed. So much food. More food than she had seen in weeks. "Eat," Helen said gently. "Take your time. It is not going anywhere." Mira picked up her fork and took a bite of scrambled eggs. They were warm and soft and buttery. She closed her eyes and felt tears prick at them again. She was so tired of crying. But she could not help it. Something about being cared for, being fed, being treated like a person instead of a problem, broke something loose inside her. She ate slowly at first, then faster. The pancakes were fluffy and sweet. The bacon was crispy. The orange juice was cold and fresh. Every bite felt like a miracle. Helen ate too, But mostly she watched Mira with a look of quiet sadness on her face. "Where is your mother now?" she asked after a while. Mira paused, a piece of toast halfway to her mouth. This was the part she did not want to talk about, the part that made her feel the most ashamed. "She is in our car," Mira said quietly. "She was not feeling well today, so she stayed there to rest. We have been living in it for a few months now. Since we lost our apartment." Helen did not gasp or look shocked. She just nodded slowly, like this was information she had already guessed. "Does your mother know where you are right now?" Mira shook her head. "I told her I was going to look for food. I did not tell her I was coming here. She would have been worried." "She sounds like a good mother," Helen said. "She is," Mira said quickly. "She is the best. She works so hard. She tries so hard. It is not her fault that things got bad. It is just life. I guess. Sometimes things happen, and you cannot stop them." Helen reached across the table and put her hand over Mira's. "Listen to me," she said. "What has happened to your family is not your fault, and it is not your mother's fault either. Sometimes life knocks people down, and it has nothing to do with how hard they try, or how good they are. Do you understand?" Mira nodded, but she was not sure she believed it. She had spent so many nights lying in the back seat of the car, wondering what they did wrong. Wondering why this happened to them, wondering if things would ever get better. "I want to meet your mother," Helen said. "I want to talk to her about your future. About your music. I think there are ways I can help, but I need to speak with her first. Is that okay?" Mira felt a spark of something in her chest, something she had not felt in a long time. It took her a moment to recognize what it was. Hope. It was small and fragile, like a tiny flame that could go out at any second. But it was there. "You really want to help us?" Mira asked. "Why? You do not even know us." Helen smiled. "Because I have spent my whole life looking for talent like yours. Because I believe that every child deserves a chance to grow into who they are meant to be. And because sometimes, the universe puts people in our path for a reason." She squeezed Mira's hand. "I was supposed to be in a meeting right now, a very important meeting with some very important people. But I was running late, so I came through the lobby instead of the side entrance, and that is when I heard you playing." She paused, her eyes shining. "If I had been on time, I would have missed you completely. But I was not on time. I was exactly where I needed to be. Exactly when I needed to be there. Do you think that is a coincidence?" Mira shook her head slowly. She did not believe in coincidences. Her father used to say that everything happens for a reason, even if we cannot see it at the time. "Finish your breakfast," Helen said. "And then we are going to find your mother." Together, they found the car parked 3 blocks away, tucked behind a grocery store where no one would bother them. It was an old Honda Civic with rust spots on the doors and a crack running across the windshield. The back seat was piled with blankets and clothes and everything else Mira and her mother owned in the world. Mira's mother was sitting in the front seat with her eyes closed. She looked tired, even while resting. There were dark circles under her eyes and lines on her face that had not been there a year ago. Life had been hard on her. Anyone could see that. When Mira knocked on the window, her mother jumped awake. Her eyes went wide when she saw Mira standing there with a stranger. She quickly got out of the car, pulling her thin coat tight around her shoulders. "Mira, what is going on? Who is this? Are you okay?" Her voice was high and tight with worry. She looked at Helen with suspicion, the way any mother would look at a stranger standing next to her child. "Mom, it is okay," Mira said quickly. "This is Helen. She runs a music school. She heard me play piano, and she wants to help us." Her mother blinked. "Play piano? What are you talking about? Where did you find a piano?" Mira took a deep breath and told her everything. The hotel, the lobby, the beautiful grand piano sitting in the corner, the security guard who tried to throw her out, the music that poured out of her like water from a broken dam, the crowd that gathered, the applause. Helen appearing like something out of a dream. Her mother listened without saying a word. Her eyes filled with tears, and she pressed a hand over her mouth like she was trying to hold something in. When Mira finished, There was a long silence. Then her mother turned to Helen. "Is this true? She really played for all those people?" Helen nodded. She played Chopin, one of the most difficult pieces ever written for piano. And she played it beautifully. "I have been teaching music for 30 years, and I have never heard anything quite like it." Mira's mother let out a sound that was half laugh and half sob. She pulled Mira into a tight hug, squeezing her so hard that Mira could barely breathe. "Your father," she whispered into Mira's hair. "He would be so proud of you. So proud." They stood like that for a long moment, holding on to each other in the parking lot behind the grocery store. Helen waited patiently, giving them the space they needed. Finally, Mira's mother pulled back and wiped her eyes. She turned to Helen with a look that was equal parts hope and fear. "You said you want to help. What does that mean exactly?" Helen explained everything. She ran a music conservatory, a special school for young people with extraordinary talent. They offered scholarships to students who could not afford to pay, full scholarships that covered everything, including lessons, materials, and access to practice rooms with real pianos. But that was not all. Helen also had connections with organizations that helped families in difficult situations. She knew people who could help them find housing. She knew people who could help Mira's mother find work. She had spent 30 years building a network of people who believed in second chances. "I cannot promise that everything will be easy," Helen said. "But I can promise that you will not be alone anymore. There are people who want to help. All you have to do is let them." Mira's mother started crying again. But this time, they were different tears. Not sad tears, not hopeless tears. These were tears of relief, like a weight being lifted off her shoulders after carrying it for so long. "Why?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why would you do this for us? You do not even know us." Helen smiled softly. "Because your daughter has a gift, and gifts like hers are rare. They deserve to be protected and nurtured. And because I believe that when we have the power to help someone, we should use it." She reached out and took Mira's mother's hand. "You have been strong for so long. You have done everything you could to take care of your daughter. Now let someone take care of you for a little while." That was the moment everything changed. Within a week, Mira and her mother moved out of their car and into a small apartment provided by a housing organization Helen worked with. It was nothing fancy, just 2 bedrooms and a tiny kitchen, but it had heat. It had running water. It had beds with real mattresses and a door that locked. To Mira, it felt like a palace. 2 weeks later, Mira's mother started a new job. It was an office position at a nonprofit that helped homeless families. The same organization that had helped them find their apartment. It did not pay a lot, but it was steady work, with good people. For the first time in almost a year, she had a reason to wake up in the morning that was not just about survival. And Mira started at Helen's music school. The first time she walked through the doors, she felt like she had stepped into another world. There were practice rooms with beautiful pianos. There were teachers who had played in concert halls all over the world. There were other students, kids her age who loved music just as much as she did. But the best part, the part that made Mira cry the first time she saw it, was the piano in her new apartment. Helen had arranged for a small upright to be delivered, donated by a family whose children had grown up and moved away. It was old and a little out of tune, but to Mira, it was perfect. The first night in their new home, after her mother had gone to bed, Mira sat down at that piano and played. She played the songs her father had taught her. She played until her fingers ached and her eyes grew heavy. She played until she could almost feel him sitting beside her again, smiling that big smile of his. "I kept my promise, Dad," she whispered to the empty room. "I never really stopped." Meanwhile, something else was happening that Mira did not know about. The video of her playing in the hotel lobby had been posted online. Someone in the crowd that day had recorded the whole thing on their phone, from the first note to the last. They uploaded it with a simple caption: "Homeless girl walks into hotel and plays piano like a professional." The video went viral. Within a month, it had been viewed over 15 million times. News stations picked up the story. Journalists wanted interviews, People from all over the world sent messages of support and encouragement. Mira did not care about any of that. She did not care about being famous or being on the news. All she cared about was the music and her mother in their little apartment that finally felt like home. But the attention did bring one thing she never expected. 3 years later, at 15 years old, Mira performed at one of the most famous concert halls in the country. She walked out onto that stage in a beautiful dress, with her hair done and her heart pounding. The audience was huge, hundreds of people sitting in velvet seats, waiting to hear her play. She looked out at the crowd and found the faces she was looking for. Her mother, sitting in the front row, crying already, even though Mira had not played a single note. Helen, sitting right beside her, smiling with pride. And next to them, the security guard from the hotel. The one who had almost thrown her out that day 3 years ago. He had become a family friend. He never missed one of her performances. Mira sat down at the grand piano. She took a deep breath. She placed her fingers on the keys, and then she played. She played for her mother, who never gave up even when everything fell apart. She played for Helen, who saw something special in a hungry girl with dirty clothes. She played for every person who had ever been told they did not belong. But most of all, she played for her father. For the man who had put music inside her and told her it would never leave. He was right. It never did.